An elderly man and his pet raven stumble upon a gruesome discovery inside an isolated cabin. What they find is not only macabre, but the key to a dark legal mystery, where the raven's unusual intelligence will be the only hope to unravel the truth. The door creaked open, revealing an interior that smelled of mold, dust, and stagnant time. Elias, in his early 70s, stepped cautiously into the cabin, the weight of his cane echoing on the rotten wooden floorboards. Corvus, his pet raven, glided from the old man's shoulder to an exposed ceiling beam, his black, gleaming eyes scanning the room with almost human curiosity. "Nothing much, Corvus," Elias mumbled, his voice hoarse, more to himself than to the bird. "Just another one of the many places time has forgotten." The cabin was small, a single room with a cold fireplace and a fogged window that barely filtered the grey afternoon light. Old furniture covered by frayed sheets looked like ghosts beneath the thick dust. Elias began to inspect, nudging the sheets with the tip of his cane, revealing broken chairs and a table with cup rings. There was nothing unusual, just abandonment. Suddenly, Corvus let out a sharp caw, different from his usual calls. He descended from the beam and landed on the floor, near a loose floorboard, a few feet from the fireplace. With his strong beak, he pecked the board repeatedly, then tried to lift it with his head, emitting small squeaks of frustration. "What is it, my friend?" Elias approached, his curiosity piqued by the raven's persistence. He knelt with difficulty, feeling his knee protest. The board was, indeed, loose. With a little effort, he managed to lift it, revealing a small, dark, dusty compartment underneath. Inside, there was no gold or jewels, but something far more sinister. A small bundle of dark fabric, stained and stiffened, seemed to have been hidden in haste. Beside it, a silver brooch with an intricate design of a rose and a thorn gleamed faintly in the gloom. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. The brooch. He knew it. Not personally, but from newspapers, from TV news reports that had dominated the country years ago. It was the brooch of Sarah Jenkins, the young art student who disappeared without a trace 5 years ago, whose case became one of the state's biggest unsolved mysteries. The police had scoured every square inch of the region, but never found a single clue to her, much less her distinctive brooch, which was a family heirloom. His hands trembled as he picked up the bundle. The fabric was rough and stiff. As he unfolded it with his fingertips, it revealed what appeared to be a torn piece of cloth, perhaps from a shirt with a dark, dried stain that Elias didn't want to identify, but that his instinct screamed was blood. And even more disturbing, a small, crumpled piece of paper, with some hand-drawn, almost illegible letters and symbols. A heavy silence fell over the cabin, broken only by the sound of Elias's ragged breathing. Corvus, who had been silent, now let out a strange sound, a hoarse, distorted imitation of a muffled scream, followed by a whispered, "No! No!" which Elias vaguely recognized as something he himself had once said upon seeing tragic news on television. The raven then gently pecked the brooch, as if recognizing its importance. Elias felt the weight of the discovery crush him. It wasn't just a macabre find. It was the key piece, the evidence that justice had sought for years. The cabin, once a forgotten refuge, transformed into the stage of a dark drama, and he, an old recluse, and his raven, unexpected witnesses, were now at its center. "Corvus," Elias whispered, his voice choked. He looked at the bird, which stared back with unusual intensity. "What have we found, my friend? What have we found?" The sunlight began to fade, and the cabin plunged into even deeper shadows, guarding its secrets and the terrible truth Elias and Corvus had just unearthed. The world outside needed to know, but how? And who would believe an old man and his talking raven? The journey to unravel the mystery was just beginning. Elias felt his heart pound erratically in his chest, an uneven rhythm that seemed to echo the cabin's heavy silence. Sarah Jenkins' brooch, the dark stain on the fabric, and the enigmatic note were more than mere objects. They were silent cries of a long-forgotten tragedy, now resurrected by him and his raven. "No, no," Corvus repeated, his voice hoarse, almost a lament. The sound, such a precise imitation of human despair, made Elias shiver. The bird pecked the brooch again, then the piece of fabric, as if trying to extract more secrets from them. Elias knew he couldn't ignore it. The image of Sarah Jenkins' young face, which he had seen so many times on the news, haunted his mind. Justice had failed, and now, by a twist of fate, the truth was in his wrinkled hands. But who would believe him, an old recluse, living on the fringes of society, with a talking raven? The idea seemed absurd, worthy of a fairy tale, not a courtroom. "Corvus, my friend," Elias whispered, his voice choked with emotion and fear. "This is too big for us." He looked at the brooch, then at the piece of cloth. The dark stain seemed to pulsate in the gloom. We need to tell someone." The raven tilted its head, its black eyes fixed on Elias, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. He let out a soft caw, almost encouraging. With trembling hands, Elias carefully wrapped the brooch and the fabric in the crumpled piece of paper, forming a small package. He didn't want to touch the dark stain more than necessary, the smell of mold and earth now mixed with a subtle, metallic, ancient odor that made him swallow hard. "Come on, Corvus," he said, rising with difficulty. Every joint protested, but adrenaline propelled him. "We can't leave this here." He tucked the bundle into the inner pocket of his coat, feeling the weight of responsibility. Before leaving, Elias looked around the cabin one last time. The cold fireplace, the covered furniture, the fogged window. Everything seemed the same, but the atmosphere had changed. What was once a place of oblivion was now a sanctuary of secrets. Corvus flew to Elias's shoulder, nestling there like a silent guardian. Together they left the cabin, Elias closing the door carefully, the creak echoing in the darkening forest. The sun was already setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. But the beauty of the landscape could not dispel the shadow that hung over them. The walk back home was long and silent. Elias felt the weight of the bundle against his chest, a burden heavier than any firewood he had ever carried. His mind swirled with questions. How would the police react? Would they take an old man and his raven seriously? He could imagine the skeptical looks, the condescending questions. Upon arriving at his small house, Elias turned on the lights, breaking the darkness. Corvus landed on his usual perch, watching him with his peculiar intensity. Elias picked up the landline phone, the old device feeling even heavier in his hands. He dialed the local police station, his heart pounding. "Willow Creek Police Department," a monotone voice answered. "My name is Elias Vance," he began, his voice firmer than he expected. I found something I think might be related to the Sarah Jenkins case." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Elias could almost feel the disbelief. "Mr. Vance, the Jenkins case was closed years ago. We're sure all leads were exhausted," the voice replied with a weary tone. No, Elias insisted, urgency growing in his voice. "I found her brooch and other things in an abandoned cabin east of the creek." Another pause, this time longer. Elias could hear the sound of a keyboard and a distant murmur. "Mr. Vance, please remain calm. Where exactly are you? We can send a patrol car to your residence so you can explain better." Elias gave his address, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. The first step was done. Now, the hardest part would begin, convincing the authorities that what he and Corvus had found was the truth, and that the key to unraveling the mystery might lie in a raven's memories. He looked at Corvus, who watched him intently. "The journey has just begun, my friend," he murmured, "and it's going to be a long one." The sound of the siren, faint at first, gradually grew, breaking the night's silence in the forest. Elias felt a knot in his stomach. The reality of what he had done, what he had found, weighed heavily on him. Corvus, on his perch, turned his head, his eyes watching the window, with an intelligence that seemed to transcend that of a bird. Two police officers, a man and a woman, stepped out of the patrol car. The man, tall and with a serious expression, was Detective Miller. The woman, younger and with an attentive gaze, was Officer Ramirez. They approached Elias's door, which was already open. "Mr. Vance," Detective Miller asked, his voice grave but polite, "we received your call." "Yes, that's me," Elias replied, his voice a little more shaky than he would have liked. He gestured for them to come in. "Please come in." The officers entered, their crisp uniforms contrasting with the rustic simplicity of Elias's home. Their eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on Corvus, who observed everything with curiosity. "You mentioned finding something related to the Sarah Jenkins case," Officer Ramirez said, pulling out a small notepad. "It's an old case, Mr. Vance. It's been extensively investigated." "I know," Elias affirmed, urgency in his voice. "But what I found, the police never did." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat, feeling the heavy bundle against his chest. "It's her brooch, the rose and thorn brooch." There was a tense silence. Miller and Ramirez's eyes met for an instant, a quick exchange of professional skepticism. "Mr. Vance, many items have been falsely identified over the years," Miller began, his voice cautious. "Well-meaning people, but—" "It's not a fake," Elias interrupted him, taking out the bundle with slightly trembling hands. He unfolded it on the wooden table, revealing the silver brooch, the stained piece of fabric, and the crumpled note. The faint light from Elias's lamp fell upon the objects. The brooch, with its unmistakable design, gleamed. Officer Ramirez stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the object. Miller, in turn, leaned in, his expression shifting from skepticism to cautious seriousness. This is the brooch," Ramirez whispered, her voice filled with genuine surprise. She had seen the photos in the case files. "It's identical." Miller picked up the brooch with his fingertips, examining it closely. "Where did you find this, Mr. Vance?" His voice was now firmer, without the condescending tone from before. "In an abandoned cabin east of the creek," Elias explained, pointing vaguely in the direction. "It was hidden under a loose floorboard. Corvus found it." The officers looked at Corvus, who let out a soft caw, as if confirming the story. "The Raven?" Miller asked, a slight smile of disbelief appearing on his lips. "Yes, he has unusual intelligence," Elias defended. "He alerted me to the loose floorboard." Ramirez, still focused on the brooch, picked up the piece of fabric. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the dark, dried stain. She avoided touching it directly, but the gravity of the find was undeniable. "And this? It looks like blood." "I didn't touch the stain," Elias said quickly. "But yes, that's what I figured." Miller picked up the crumpled note, unfolding it carefully. The hand-drawn letters and symbols were almost illegible, but the presence of the note added another layer of mystery. "We need to cordon off the cabin immediately," Miller said, his voice now full of authority, "and take these items for forensic analysis." He looked at Elias. "Mr. Vance, you've made a very important discovery. Can you take us to the cabin now?" Elias nodded, feeling a mix of relief and a new wave of anxiety. He had handed over the evidence, but the journey was far from over. "Corvus, my friend," Elias murmured, looking at the bird. "It seems our adventure is just beginning." Corvus tilted his head, letting out a hoarse, "No!" No! An imitation of Elias's lament, which made the officers exchange intrigued glances. They still didn't understand the depth of the raven's intelligence, but the brooch in their hands was irrefutable proof that Elias Vance and his peculiar companion had unearthed something justice had lost for years. The truth, long buried, was finally beginning to emerge from the shadows. Miller and Ramirez's eyes met again, a spark of confusion and curiosity mixed with professionalism. Corvus's hoarse, "No, no," such a perfect imitation of human lament, hung in the air for an instant, breaking the tense silence. "What was that?" Officer Ramirez asked, her voice a little louder than necessary, her eyes fixed on the perched raven. "That's Corvus," Elias explained, a slight smile appearing on his wrinkled lips, despite the gravity of the situation. He repeats what he hears. He heard me say that in the cabin." Detective Miller, who still held the brooch with almost reverent care, looked at the raven with an expression that wavered between astonishment and disbelief. "A talking raven? That's unusual." "He's more than unusual, Detective," Elias insisted, urgency in his voice. "He's the reason I found all this. He guided me to the loose floorboard." Ramirez, who had already put away her notepad, picked up the stained piece of fabric with her fingertips, avoiding direct contact with the dark, dried stain. "We need a forensic team here immediately, and the note. That could be crucial." Miller nodded, his expression now completely serious. The initial skepticism had been swept away by the tangible evidence. "Mr. Vance, you're right. This is big, very big. The Jenkins case was never truly closed in our hearts, just filed away for lack of evidence." He looked at Elias with renewed respect. "Can you take us to the cabin now? We need to cordon off the area before anything is disturbed." "Yes, of course," Elias replied, feeling the weight of responsibility transform into a sense of purpose. Adrenaline still coursed through his veins, but now mixed with a cold determination. "It's about a 20-minute walk east of the creek. I can show you the way." "Excellent. Officer Ramirez, call for backup and a forensic team. Inform them we have a potential crime scene related to the Sarah Jenkins case, with primary evidence found. Tell them to meet us at the cabin," Miller instructed, his voice firm and authoritative. Ramirez nodded, already reaching for the radio on her belt. As she spoke in codes and coordinates, Miller turned to Elias. "Mr. Vance, you must be exhausted, but speed is essential here." "I'm fine, Detective," Elias assured him, though he felt every one of his early 70s weighing on him. "Corvus, my friend, let's go." The raven, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, flew from its perch to Elias's shoulder, nestling there. Its black, gleaming eyes seemed to observe the officers with an intelligence that defied comprehension. Night had already completely swallowed the forest, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. The officers turned on their powerful flashlights, whose beams cut through the darkness, revealing the narrow, uneven path Elias knew so well. The patrol car remained at Elias's house, a beacon of light and authority in the midst of the darkness. The walk was silent, except for the rustle of leaves under their feet and the distant sound of a coyote. Elias led the way, his steps slow but steady, guided by memory and urgency. Miller and Ramirez followed closely, their flashlights dancing over the trees and the ground. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every rustle of a leaf, a whisper from the past. Elias felt the officer's gaze upon him, a mixture of respect and perhaps still a lingering doubt about the talking raven. But the brooch, now securely stored in an evidence bag in Miller's hands, was undeniable. Finally, the silhouette of the cabin emerged through the trees, a dark and silent mass against the night sky. The door, which Elias had carefully closed, now seemed like a sealed mouth guarding terrible secrets. "It's here," Elias whispered, pointing with a trembling hand. Miller and Ramirez approached cautiously, their flashlights sweeping the cabin's facade. The air around it felt colder, denser. The atmosphere Elias had felt earlier, of a sanctuary of secrets, now felt more like a mausoleum. "Officer Ramirez, secure the area and await the forensic team," Miller instructed, his voice low and serious. "Mr. Vance, can you show us exactly where you found the items?" Elias nodded, feeling a chill run down his spine. The cabin, which was once merely a refuge for his memories, was now the epicenter of a long-buried truth, about to be unearthed. Corvus, on Elias's shoulder, let out a low caw, as if sensing the tension in the air. The journey to the truth was just beginning, and the abandoned cabin was its portal. "Let's go in, Mr. Vance," Miller said, his voice a grave whisper. He gestured to the slightly ajar door, which Elias had closed but not locked. Ramirez remained outside, her flashlight sweeping the cabin's periphery, creating a perimeter of light in the dense forest darkness. The cold night air carried with it the damp scent of earth and decaying leaves. Elias entered first, his eyes adjusting to the gloom that Miller's powerful flashlight barely managed to dispel. The smell of mold and old wood was stronger now, mixed with an almost imperceptible metallic odor that Elias hadn't noticed before, or perhaps had ignored in his initial shock. Corvus tightened his talons on his shoulder, his small black eyes scanning the cabin's interior with almost human attention, as if reliving every moment of the discovery. "It was here," Elias indicated, pointing to the corner where the loose floorboard was. Miller's flashlight beam danced over the uneven wooden floor, illuminating the exact spot. I was just cleaning up, as I do from time to time." Corvus was curious about something under the board. He pecked and pecked until I realized it was loose. Elias felt a lump in his throat as he relived the scene. Miller knelt, examining the floorboard with the tip of his flashlight. He didn't touch it, just observed the wear marks and the small crack Elias had mentioned. The detective noticed how the board seemed slightly misaligned compared to the others, a detail that would go unnoticed by a less trained eye. "And the items were all here, under this board?" "Yes," Elias confirmed, his voice choked by the vivid memory of the discovery. The brooch, the fabric, and the note, all wrapped together, as if someone had tried to hide everything at once in a hurry. The fabric was damp, even after all this time. Miller stood up, his expression grim. He swept his gaze across the cabin's interior, his eyes lingering on the few dusty pieces of furniture. A rustic table, a bench, a cold fireplace. The dirt and abandonment were evident, but there was a disturbing stillness, as if time had stopped there at the moment of the crime. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of Ramirez on the radio, communicating with dispatch, and the rustle of leaves outside. "It's a crime scene, no doubt," Miller murmured, more to himself than to Elias. "They wouldn't hide something like this if there wasn't something to hide." He turned to Elias, his eyes fixed. "Mr. Vance, you didn't touch anything else, did you? Just the items you handed over to us?" "No, Detective. As soon as I saw what it was, and the smell, I knew I shouldn't touch anything else. I just closed the board and left to call you," Elias explained, his voice firm, but his eyes still reflecting the shock of the discovery. He felt the weight of the cabin's history on his shoulders. Corvus, as if to reinforce Elias's words, let out a soft, "No, no," repeating the lament Elias had uttered in the cabin. Miller looked at the raven again, a hint of fascination mixed with the seriousness of his mission. That animal was indeed extraordinary. Suddenly, the sound of tires on the dirt road approached, followed by flashing lights through the trees. More patrol cars and a white van with forensics in dark letters began to arrive. The forest, once silent and mysterious, now came alive with the arrival of the investigation team. The air filled with the buzz of voices and the sound of equipment being unloaded. Ramirez approached the cabin door, her silhouette framed by the emergency lights. Detective Miller, the forensic team and backup have arrived. They're ready to start. Miller nodded. Excellent. Keep everyone out of the cabin until the crime scene team can make an initial assessment. No one enters without protective gear. He turned to Elias. Mr. Vance, we need you to stay nearby to point out details, but please don't touch anything. From now on, everything here is evidence. Elias felt a relief mixed with exhaustion. The responsibility was being transferred to the right hands. Understood, Detective. Forensic technicians, dressed in white suits and masks, began unloading their equipment. One of them, a woman with short hair and glasses, approached Miller. Detective, I'm Dr. Evans, head of the forensic team. Officer Ramirez gave us a brief summary. Where do we start? Miller pointed to Elias. Dr. Evans, this is Mr. Elias Vance. He's the one who made the discovery. He can show us the exact spot where the items were found. He's our key witness. Dr. Evans looked at Elias with calm professionalism, but her eyes revealed a keen curiosity, especially when her gaze fixed on Corvus. Mr. Vance, please guide us, but as the detective mentioned, please don't touch anything. Elias felt the gravity of the moment. The cabin, which was once merely a place of his memories, was now under the cold, methodical scrutiny of science. He pointed to the loose floorboard again, and Corvus, on his shoulder, remained silent, observing everything with his enigmatic intelligence. The truth, long buried, was about to be exhumed, layer by layer. The mystery of Sarah Jenkins was one step closer to being unraveled. Dr. Evans, with her team of forensic technicians, moved with almost surgical precision. The initial buzz of voices gave way to a focused quiet, interrupted only by the click of cameras and the rustle of protective suits. Elias, with Corvus still on his shoulder, watched from a corner, feeling like an intruder in his own refuge. The strong light from the forensic flashlights swept every corner of the cabin, revealing cobwebs and accumulated dust that the gloom had previously disguised. Mr. Vance, please show us the exact location, Dr. Evans requested, her voice calm and professional, as one of her technicians began photographing the general floor area. Elias approached, pointing to the loose floorboard. It was here, this board. Dr. Evans knelt, her trained eyes examining the wood. Detective Miller, you mentioned the items have already been removed. Can you confirm they were exactly under this board? Yes, Dr. Evans, Miller replied, approaching, wrapped together, hidden in this cavity. A technician, wearing gloves and sterilized tweezers, began working on the floorboard. With slow and deliberate movements, he lifted it, revealing the dark cavity underneath. The flashlight's beam revealed the dusty, empty interior, exactly as Miller had described. Primary cavity clear, the technician announced, his voice muffled by the mask. No visible residue of the items, photographing the interior. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. That empty space, which once held a terrible secret, now seemed just a hole in the floor. But Dr. Evans didn't seem satisfied. Her eyes scanned the edge of the cavity with particular intensity. Wait, she said, raising her hand. There's something else. An irregularity at the base of the cavity. It looks like a second layer. The technician leaned in again, and with a fine tool, began carefully scraping away the dirt and mold. Slowly, a small, almost imperceptible opening began to reveal itself beneath the first cavity. It wasn't a loose floorboard, but a kind of hidden compartment, sealed with old mortar and masterfully disguised. A tense silence hung in the cabin. Miller and Ramirez, who had entered to observe, held their breath. Elias felt a chill deeper than the night's cold. Corvus, on his shoulder, let out a low caw, a sound that seemed to echo everyone's apprehension. It's a secondary compartment, Dr. Evans murmured, her eyes gleaming with a mix of professional excitement and seriousness. Very well hidden. The technician, under Dr. Evans's guidance, worked with even greater delicacy. Every speck of dust was treated as potential evidence. Finally, with a soft click, the small lid of the secondary compartment gave way. The flashlight's beam penetrated the deeper darkness. What was revealed made the cabin air seem even thinner. There were no more brooches or notes. Instead, wrapped in a piece of faded fabric, there was a small object. The technician, with tweezers, removed it with extreme care. It was a bone, small, fragile, but undeniably human, and the fabric that wrapped it. Elias felt a lump in his throat. It was the same floral pattern he had seen in photos of young Sarah Jenkins. A piece of her favorite blouse, now stained and faded by time, but still recognizable. "My God," Miller whispered, his voice hoarse. His eyes fixed on the bone and the fabric. What was once crucial evidence, now transformed into irrefutable proof of a heinous crime. Elias felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The cabin, which he thought was just a hiding place for objects, was actually a tomb. The image of Sarah Jenkins, the smiling young woman from the photos, mingled with the sight of that small bone. Corvus, as if sensing Elias's pain, nestled closer, letting out an almost inaudible "No, no," a repetition of Elias's lament, but now with a resonance of horror. Dr. Evans, despite the gravity of the discovery, maintained her professional composure. "We need to isolate this immediately. It's primary evidence of human remains. And the fabric. We need to compare it with descriptions of Sarah Jenkins' clothes." "It's hers," Elias said, his voice almost a whisper. "I saw it in the photos. Her blouse." Miller looked at Elias, his eyes full of new understanding and respect. The old man and his raven had not just found evidence, they had uncovered the darkest truth. The cabin was not just the scene of a crime, but the place where Sarah Jenkins' life had ended. "Officer Ramirez," Miller instructed, his voice now firm and charged with new urgency, "maintain the perimeter. No one enters or leaves without my permission. Dr. Evans, please proceed with the full protocol for human remains. We need every detail, every fiber." Dr. Evans nodded, already giving instructions to her team. The cabin, once a silent sanctuary of secrets, was now a stage for macabre revelations. The mystery of Sarah Jenkins was not just one step closer to being unraveled, it had been brutally exposed. And the raven, Corvus, was the only silent eyewitness to it all. His intelligence, once a curiosity, now became a fundamental piece for justice. The small bone, wrapped in faded fabric, lay on a sterile tray. Under the cold light of the forensic flashlights, Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, a cold that didn't come from the night, but from the chilling understanding of the truth. That fragment, so small and fragile, was the tangible link to a lost life, irrefutable proof of a violent end. His eyes welled up, and Corvus, on his shoulder, let out a "No, no," deeper and more mournful than before, as if Elias's pain had found an echo in his own soul. Dr. Evans, with the unwavering composure of a professional trained for tragedy, leaned over the tray. "We need high-resolution photos from every angle, and the fabric. We need to handle it with the utmost delicacy. Every fiber could contain crucial information." Her voice was a controlled murmur. But the gravity of the situation was palpable. Miller watched, his jaw tense. What he had imagined as a disappearance case with circumstantial evidence now transformed into a full-blown homicide investigation. Sarah Jenkins' innocence had been stolen, and her body, or what remained of it, had been hidden with calculated cruelty. Dr. Evans, as soon as we have the photos and initial collection, the bone and fabric go straight to the DNA and forensic anthropology lab. We need a formal identification as quickly as possible. And the fabric, a fiber and pattern analysis. Understood, Detective, she replied, without taking her eyes off the material. We're already documenting everything. The secondary cavity will also be examined for any residue, any micro-evidence that might have been left behind. Elias felt the weight of the cabin's history crush him. He had spent years coming to this place, seeking refuge, and never imagined that such a dark secret lay beneath his feet. The image of Sarah Jenkins, the smiling young woman from the photos he had seen in the case files, now merged with the sight of that small bone. The hope that she might be alive somewhere had turned to dust. She didn't deserve this, Elias murmured, his voice choked. Corvus rubbed his head against Elias's neck, an unusual gesture of comfort for the raven, as if understanding the depth of his companion's pain. The no now seemed like a shared lament, a silent elegy for the victim. Miller placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. No one deserves this, Mr. Vance, but thanks to you and Corvus, the truth is starting to come out, and we will find who did this. There was a new determination in his voice, a solemn promise. Ramirez, who had remained silent, observing the scene with growing gravity, now approached. Detective, the search team is ready to sweep the external area in case there's more evidence, and the perimeter is secure. Excellent. Maintain high alert. We don't want anything disturbed, Miller instructed. He knew that the discovery of human remains transformed the nature of the investigation. The cabin was not just a location of interest, it was the epicenter of a heinous crime. As the forensic team continued its methodical work, Dr. Evans turned to Elias, her eyes professional but with a touch of respect. Mr. Vance, you were right about the fabric. The floral pattern is distinctive and matches the descriptions we have of Sarah Jenkins' clothes. It's a strong match. The confirmation, though expected, hit Elias hard. It was hers. What he had intuitively felt was now a cold scientific certainty. Miller picked up his radio. Dispatch. This is Miller, confirming the discovery of human remains at the cabin crime scene. Dr. Evans from Forensics is on site. We need to notify the Jenkins family immediately and prepare a full search warrant for this property. The investigation is now a homicide. The air in the cabin seemed to vibrate with urgency and sorrow. The focused silence of the forensic team was broken only by the click of cameras and the rustle of the suits. Elias, with Corvus on his shoulder, watched the scene unfold, feeling like a vital yet painful link in a chain of events he could never have foreseen. The truth, long buried, had been exhumed. Now the hunt for justice began, and the Raven, the silent witness, had seen everything. Dr. Evans, gloved and masked, handled the fabric with fine tweezers, carefully placing it into a transparent evidence bag. The preservation is remarkable, considering the time and conditions, she commented, more to herself than to the others. This will give us a good chance with DNA, and the floral pattern. It's unmistakable. The description of Sarah Jenkins' blouse is exact. Miller nodded, his face a mask of seriousness. He moved slightly away from the main scene, picking up his phone to make a discreet but urgent call. Yes, this is Miller. We need all available resources. Homicide confirmed. The forensic team is on site, but we'll need more people for the external sweep and to start revisiting the archives. I want every detail of the Jenkins case re-examined, every witness, every cold lead, and prepare a full search warrant for this property, including the adjacent land. The cabin, his refuge, was now a stage of tragedy. He looked at Corvus, who was strangely quiet, his black eyes fixed on the tray where the small bone had been removed. The Raven seemed to absorb the gravity of the moment, its keen intelligence perceiving the change in atmosphere. Mr. Vance, Doctor, Evans approached, her voice soft but firm. "I know it's difficult, but we need you and Corvus to stay nearby. There are procedures that require the presence of the discoverer, and your perspective could be crucial. Besides, Corvus is a unique witness." Elias nodded slowly. "I understand, Doctor. I won't leave until everything is done. Sarah deserves this." He stroked Corvus's feathers. "Both of us." Miller hung up the phone and joined them, his expression grim. "The Jenkins family has been notified. It's the hardest part of the job, but at least now they have an answer, however painful." He looked at Elias, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Your persistence, Mr. Vance, and Corvus's brought this to light. What seemed like a hopeless case now has a path forward." Ramirez, who had supervised the perimeter's security, returned, her face pale. "Detective, the external search team is ready. We're going to start a systematic sweep in concentric circles from the cabin. Anything out of place, any trace, will be marked and photographed." "Good," Miller replied. "I want them to look for anything that might have been discarded, any tools, any personal objects that don't belong here, and keep an eye out for any signs of soil disturbance, however subtle." As the forensic team continued to document every inch of the secondary cavity, Elias felt a profound weariness. The initial adrenaline had given way to emotional exhaustion. He sat on an improvised bench, Corvus still on his shoulder, watching the work. The raven suddenly let out a low kee, almost a whisper, and tilted its head towards a dark corner of the cabin where a pile of debris and rusty tools had accumulated. Miller and Dr. Evans exchanged glances. "Key?" Miller repeated, frowning. "Corvus, did you see a key?" The raven didn't repeat the word, but flew from Elias's shoulder, landing on the pile of debris and pecking at an object partially hidden under an old tarp. It was a subtle but deliberate movement. Dr. Evans stepped forward cautiously, using tweezers to remove the tarp. There, among pieces of rotten wood and dust, lay a small metal key, old and rusty, but unmistakable. "Well, I'll be damned," Miller murmured, his eyes widening slightly. "Corvus, you're unbelievable." Elias felt a new shiver. The raven had not only led to the discovery of the body, but now seemed to be pointing to more evidence. Corvus's intelligence was an invaluable tool, and the hunt for justice had just gained a witness who saw and remembered in a way no one else could imagine. The key, however small, could be the next link in the chain, opening doors to the truth that was still hidden. Dr. Evans, with the precision of a surgeon, used sterile tweezers to lift the old tarp. The small metal key lay there, corroded by time and moisture, but still with a defined shape. It was an old key, the kind that opened robust padlocks or solid wooden doors, with an ornate handle and a single tooth. Corvus, satisfied with his revelation, returned to Elias's shoulder, observing the scene with his black, impenetrating eyes. "A key," Dr. Evans murmured, examining it closely without touching it directly. "It appears to be wrought iron, quite old, but why would it be here, hidden under debris?" She picked up a small evidence bag and, with the tweezers, carefully placed the key inside, sealing it. "We'll need a detailed analysis, cleaning, scanning for latent prints, and perhaps even an approximate dating." Miller approached, his voice laden with a mixture of astonishment and renewed determination. "Corvus, you're a genius, my friend. First the body, now this. Elias, you have an investigative partner who defies all logic." Elias felt a warmth in his chest, a bitter pride. He's always been like this, detective. Observant. He doesn't forget anything. He looked at the raven, which rubbed its head against his neck, as if understanding the gravity of its own contribution. "This key could be crucial," Miller continued, his eyes fixed on the evidence bag. "It could open something, a cabinet, a chest, a safe deposit box, or perhaps even a door that leads us to the killer." Dr. Evans, this key goes to the lab with the bone and the fabric. Top priority. I want to know everything about it, where it was made, what kind of lock it's for, and if there's any trace of DNA or fibers. Understood, Detective, she replied, already labeling the bag. Every piece of evidence will be handled with the utmost rigor. Ramirez, who had witnessed the scene, shook her head in disbelief. I've never seen anything like it. A raven, pointing out evidence. Welcome to my world, Ramirez, Miller said with a tense smile. This case is becoming something none of us ever imagined. Elias, Corvus, you're not just discoverers, you're active witnesses, and that, believe me, will make all the difference. The mention of Corvus as a witness resonated with Elias. He knew the raven was intelligent, but the idea of its participation in a courtroom seemed surreal, almost impossible. However, what he had just witnessed, what everyone had witnessed, was undeniable. Corvus had pointed to the key. The question is, Elias murmured, his voice hoarse, what does this key open, and why did the killer leave it here, so close to the body? Miller pondered. It could have been an oversight, or perhaps something he didn't consider important at the time, or most likely he hid it here because it led to something he didn't want found, and then didn't get a chance to retrieve it. He turned to Ramirez. Officer, as soon as the external search team finishes, I want you to do a thorough sweep inside the cabin again. Every corner, every crevice. Look for any lock this key might open. Any secret compartment, anything that seems out of place. Yes, Detective, Ramirez replied, already grabbing her flashlight and beginning to re-examine the cabin walls and floor with a new look. The cabin, once a place of isolation and peace for Elias, now pulsed with the energy of an ongoing investigation. The cold night air seemed to carry the weight of the revelations. The discovery of the key, guided by Corvus, added a layer of mystery and urgency. It was not just the confirmation of a crime, but the promise of a concrete lead to unravel the who and the why. Elias watched Dr. Evans walk away with the evidence bag, the small bone and floral fabric already packaged. The image of Sarah Jenkins, the smiling young woman, now had a face, a name, and a tragic story that was beginning to be told. Thanks to Corvus, the truth would no longer remain buried. The key, however small, represented the hope of opening the door to justice. The hunt for answers had just gained a new and unexpected ally. The air inside the cabin, already heavy with the smell of damp earth and old wood, now carried a different electricity, the tension of expectation. Ramirez, flashlight in hand, began the meticulous sweep Miller had ordered. Every floorboard, every crack in the log walls, every dark corner was examined with renewed attention. The other officers, previously focused on the external search, now joined him, moving dusty furniture, lifting torn rugs, lightly tapping the walls in search of hollow sounds. Elias watched, Corvus perched on his shoulder, the raven's black eyes following every movement, every beam of light that danced through the cabin. The silence was broken only by the creaks of the wood, the rustle of the officer's clothes, and Ramirez's low murmurs as he described what he found to himself or to the others. Miller approached Elias, his face marked by fatigue, but with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. It's incredible, Elias. For years this case was a ghost. No leads, no witnesses. And now, in a matter of hours, we have a body, a probable identity, and a key. All thanks to Corvus. Elias nodded, his voice still hoarse. He's always been special, Detective, but a courtroom? How would that work? The idea seemed absurd, but the image of Corvus pointing to the key was etched in his mind and in everyone's there. Miller sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Elias. There's never been a precedent. But what he did here, it's undeniable. He didn't just lead us to the body, he led us to crucial hidden evidence. That carries weight, weight that no defense attorney could easily ignore. He looked at Corvus, who tilted his head as if listening intently. He's more than a pet, Elias. He's a vital link. As they talked, a muffled shout from Ramirez echoed from the darkest corner of the cabin near the stone fireplace. "Detective, I think I found something." All eyes turned to Ramirez. He was kneeling, pointing his flashlight at a section of the floor that looked slightly different from the others. There was a small, almost imperceptible gap between two solid wooden floorboards and a slight unevenness. Miller rushed to him, followed by Elias and Corvus. "What is it, officer?" Ramirez pointed. "Here, detective, it looks like this section of the floor has been tampered with. The boards aren't nailed down like the others. And look here." He ran the tip of a gloved finger along the gap, revealing a small, rusty metal handle, almost fused with the dark wood. It was a pull handle, the kind used to lift a lid or a secret compartment. Elias's heart pounded. Corvus, on his shoulder, let out a low caw, almost a whisper. Miller knelt, examining the handle carefully. "A secret compartment," he murmured, his voice filled with contained excitement. "Exactly what we were looking for." He looked at the handle, then at Elias. "The key. Could it open this?" The tension in the cabin was palpable. The team gathered around, their flashlights converging on the small piece of metal. It was an old lock, embedded in the wood, almost invisible until one knew where to look. Rust and dirt covered it, but the shape was unmistakable. Miller turned to one of the officers. "Bring the toolkit. We need to clean this lock carefully." "And Elias," he said, looking at the old man with solemn seriousness. "Corvus guided us here. Now we need to see if he guided us to the right door." Elias felt a chill down his spine. The key, the compartment, the promise of a hidden truth. Everything was falling into place in a way that defied reason, but was undeniably real. The hunt for justice was about to open a new door, and what lay behind it, no one could predict. The cabin, once a refuge of peace, now held secrets that were about to be revealed, one by one, under the watchful eye of a raven and the determination of an old man. With steady hands and almost reverent care, one of the officers cleaned the lock, removing decades of dirt and rust. Miller took the key from the evidence bag, handing it to Elias. "Your turn, Elias. Corvus showed you the way." Elias, his heart pounding, inserted the key. It fit perfectly. A soft, ancient click echoed in the cabin. With the handle, Miller lifted the section of the floor, revealing a small, dark compartment. Inside, wrapped in a moldy silk cloth, lay a small leather diary and a rusty pistol. The diary, though damaged by moisture, contained meticulous notes. It belonged to Sarah Jenkins. Her last entries detailed a blackmail case involving a local businessman, Arthur Finch, and the discovery of a fund embezzlement scheme. Sarah had confronted Finch, threatening to expose him. The last entry, written in shaky handwriting, ended with, "He said he would make me pay. You'll regret it, you stupid girl." The pistol, a small-caliber weapon, had the initials AF engraved on the handle. The discovery was explosive. Arthur Finch, a man of impeccable reputation in town, was the killer. The police acted quickly, and Finch was arrested at his mansion, denying everything. But the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah's diary, the pistol with his initials, and Elias and Corvus's testimony about the location of the evidence. Arthur Finch's trial became a media spectacle. The prosecution, led by the determined Dr. Elena Vargas, faced an unprecedented challenge, presenting a raven as a witness. The defense scoffed at the idea, calling it a circus and desperation. On the crucial day, Elias took the witness stand. Corvus perched on his shoulder, his black eyes fixed on the room. The courtroom was silent. Dr. Vargas began, "Mr. Elias, Corvus was instrumental in discovering the evidence. Can he show us something about what happened? Elias nodded, nervous. Corvus, my friend, do you remember what the man said? That man who hurt Sarah? Corvus tilted his head, observing Finch, who sat at the defense table with a sneer. Suddenly, the raven let out a loud, clear caw, perfectly imitating a man's harsh, angry voice. "You'll regret it, you stupid girl." The phrase echoed in the room, identical to Sarah's last entry in the diary. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Finch paled, his sneer vanishing. Dr. Vargas continued, showing a photo of Arthur Finch. "Corvus, who said that?" Corvus, without hesitation, extended one of his wings and pointed directly at Arthur Finch. The room erupted in a buzz. The judge banged his gavel to restore order. The defense shouted, claiming manipulation, but the demonstration was undeniable. The voice imitation, the exact phrase from the diary, the pointing gesture. Corvus's intelligence, his keen memory, had unraveled the mystery. After days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty. Arthur Finch was convicted of Sarah Jenkins' murder. Elias and Corvus left the courtroom under the camera flashes. Justice finally served. The world had witnessed something extraordinary. The truth revealed not by human words, but by the silent and inimitable testimony of a raven. Corvus, the guardian of memory, had become the herald of justice, proving that sometimes the most unlikely witnesses hold the keys to the darkest secrets. Elias stroked Corvus's head, feeling a profound relief. The hunt was over. The truth was no longer buried.